and interesting times. For the headlines. Nigeria's electoral watchdog on Saturday postponed presidential and parliamentary elections for 1 week, just hours before polls were due to open. President Donald Trump, citing an invasion of drugs and criminals, declared a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border on Friday to fund construction of his long-sought wall, a move slammed by Democrats as an unlawful power grab. 5 people were killed and multiple police officers shot Friday when a gunman opened fire in an industrial area on the outskirts of Chicago, the latest mass shooting to hit the United States. And international skaters take part in an ice skating pageant in North Korea in honor of the country's late former leader, Kim Jong-II. I'm Judith Timero, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us. And now to the news. Nigeria's electoral watchdog on Saturday postponed presidential and parliamentary elections for 1 week, just hours before polls were due to open. Polling had been due to start at nearly 120,000 polling units in Africa's most populous nation, with a record of 73 candidates on the ballot. President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking a second term of office, but is facing a stiff challenge from the main opposition candidate, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. But the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mahmoud Yakubu, said after late-night emergency talks that the timetable was no longer feasible. Consequently, the commission has decided to reschedule to Saturday, February 23, 2019. He told reporters at INEC headquarters about 5 hours before scheduled polling. Parliamentary elections for 360 seats in the lower house of representatives and 109 seats in the Senate will be held on the same day. Governorship and state assembly elections will be pushed back to March 9, Yakubu said. He also said the delay came after a careful review of the implementation of the logistics and operational plans and the determination to conduct free, fair, and credible elections. It will afford the Commission the opportunity to address identified challenges in order to maintain the quality of their elections, he added. This was a difficult decision for the Commission to take, but necessary for the successful delivery of elections and the consolidation of their democracy, he said. Meanwhile, Nigeria's 2 main political parties on Saturday hit out a decision by the country's election watchdog to push back presidential and parliamentary elections by a week. The Independent National Electoral Commission, or INEC, blamed the postponement on logistical difficulties after reports of widespread problems in the distribution of voting materials. Yet both the ruling All Progressives Congress and the main opposition People's Democratic Party blamed the other for orchestrating the delay as a way of manipulating the vote. President Muhammadu Buhari's campaign spokesman Festus Keyamo for the APC said the news was a huge disappointment and hit out at INEC for being unprepared. Keyamo called on the body to remain impartial as the rumor mill is agog with the suggestion that this postponement has been orchestrated in collusion with the PDP. PDP candidate Atiku Abubakar blamed the Buhari government for instigating the postponement and said it hoped to disenfranchise the electorate to ensure a low turnout. Nigerians must frustrate their plans by coming out in even greater numbers on February 23. And for governorship and state assembly elections 2 weeks later, he added. With tempers expected to flare and political violence common in Nigeria, Abubakar called on his supporters to remain calm. He said, quote, "We will overcome this. You can postpone an election, but you cannot postpone destiny." In other news, President Donald Trump is citing an invasion of drugs and criminals, declared a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border on Friday to fund construction of his long-sought wall, a move slammed by Democrats as an unlawful power grab. Trump's extraordinary step would enable him to bypass congressional opposition and seek to redirect federal funds, including billions of dollars of Pentagon money, to build the wall. The move is a clear-as-day message to his right-wing base that he is trying to deliver on a key election promise, and a sign that illegal immigration is likely to remain a political flashpoint into the 2020 presidential campaign. Trump told reporters they are going to confront the national security crisis on their southern border, and they are going to do it in one way or the other. Trump's decision to resort to emergency powers after a bitter standoff with Democrats blocking his wall project culminated in a 35-day government shutdown has alarmed lawmakers, including in his Republican Party, who warn it sets a dangerous precedent.
We had a wall, we don't need the military, because we'd have a wall. So I'm going to be signing a national emergency, and it's been signed many times before. It's been signed by other presidents. From 1977 or so, it gave the presidents the power. There's rarely been a problem.
Meanwhile, President Trump's former campaign chief Paul Manafort faces up to 24 years in prison after being found to have violated his plea deal with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, a court document filed Friday said. Mueller's office said it agreed with the Justice Department calculation that Manafort should face 235 to 293 months, a fine range of $50,000 to $24,371,497.74, a term of supervised release of up to 5 years, restitution in the amount of $24,815,108.74, and forfeiture in the amount of $4,412,500, the filing said. Earlier this month, a federal district judge, Amy Berman Jackson, agreed with prosecutors that Manafort had intentionally lied to investigators about his contacts with a suspected Russian operative, Konstantin Kilimnik, in 2016 and 2017, despite having pledged to cooperate as part of a September plea agreement. Jackson also ruled that Manafort had lied about a secretive payment he made to a law firm and lied on another occasion when investigators queried him about a separate, still secret investigation related to the Mueller probe. The ruling meant that Mueller no longer has to abide by the deal in which Manafort agreed to plead guilty to 2 reduced conspiracy charges, carrying a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Manafort is one of 7 former Trump campaign associates who have been charged by Mueller's team. In other news, the Court of Tax Appeals has denied the plea of Rappler Holdings Corporation and executive editor Maria Ressa for the charges of tax evasion to be junk against them. In junking their plea, the First Division ruled the 4 amended information against them accomplished their purpose. The Supreme Court has ruled that an information need only to state the ultimate facts constituting the offense and not the finer details of why and how the crime was committed, the court said. The court also junked Rezekam's argument the trial should not push through as they had a pending motion for reconsideration before the Department of Justice. The court said the resolution of Assistant State Prosecutor Zenomar Machacon Caparos denying such motion for reconsideration had already been submitted. The administrative case filed by the Bureau of Internal Revenue against the accused, on the other hand, should not be a bar to the institution of the criminal proceedings before this court, as it is well settled that an assessment is not necessary before a criminal charge for tax evasion may be instituted, the court said. The court's decision, which came after Ressa posted bail for the cyber libel charges filed against her by businessman Wilfredo Keng, effectively paves the way for a full-blown trial. The court said the case for pre-trial on March 13 at 8:30 a.m. The Department of Justice filed the 4 tax cases against Rappler before the CTA in November 2018. A 5th tax fraud case was filed separately before the Pasig Regional Trial Court. More news when Eagle News International returns. People were killed and multiple police officers shot Friday when a gunman opened fire in an industrial area on the outskirts of Chicago, the latest mass shooting to hit the United States. The shooting took place at approximately 1:28 p.m. at a giant manufacturing complex in Aurora, Illinois, a small suburb 40 miles west of central Chicago. Police said officers engaged in a firefight with the suspect, thought to be an employee. Before he was shot dead, he was identified as 45-year-old Gary Martin. Aurora Police Chief Kristen Zeman said 5 police officers were shot. 2 were airlifted to Chicago area trauma centers. The other officers on the scene located gunshot victims inside the building. Police did not release information on the officers' condition or identify the victims. Police said they do not know the motive for the shooting, but witnesses told the local media that gunman was a disgruntled employee. Witnesses said they locked themselves into nearby buildings as the gunman began firing off rounds. Aerial TV footage showed dozens of police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks at the scene as officers with shields entered the complex.
Officers arrived and were fired upon immediately. 2 of the initial 4 officers entering the building were shot. Additional officers began to arrive and were also fired upon. A total of 5 officers were struck by gunfire. The other officers on the scene located gunshot victims inside the building. At this time, we have confirmed that 5 victims are deceased.
In other news, humanitarian aid shipments for Venezuela, which include food and various medical supplies, arrived from Puerto Rico to Colombia, which is storing tons of U.S. aid close to the border as opposition leader Juan Guaido has vowed to defy Nicolas Maduro's efforts to block the supplies from entering the country.
Un total de 2.5 toneladas llegaron hoy al centro de acopio en el Puente de la Unidad, en norte de Santander, Colombia, provenientes del estado de Puerto Rico.
Esto que estamos hoy trayendo hace falta y por eso hoy son 4 países: Estados Unidos, Puerto Rico, Colombia y Venezuela. Pero ahora se tienen que sumar muchos países más porque esta ayuda tiene que llegar.
Esta ayuda, estos insumos médicos salvarán vidas en nuestro territorio. Estos insumos médicos salvarán las vidas de nuestros niños al nacer, salvarán las vidas de nuestras madres al dar a luz.
President Nicolas Maduro hit out at the United States on Friday for stealing billions of dollars and offering crumbs in return as humanitarian aid, as Washington sanctioned 5 officials close to the Venezuelan leader. Later Friday, Maduro asked the military to prepare for a special deployment to reinforce the border with Colombia and make it impregnable. He said he is not exaggerating. In the White House, Donald Trump and Ivan Duque announced plans for war against Venezuela. The country is in the midst of an economic crisis that has left millions in poverty and facing shortages of basic necessities, such as food and medicine. Guaido, who is recognized by 50 countries as the interim president, accuses Maduro of causing economic hardship through mismanagement. Among those countries is Costa Rica, whose Foreign Affairs Ministry on Friday gave 3 Maduro-appointed diplomats 60 calendar days to leave the country. Maduro meanwhile blames Venezuela's woes on U.S. sanctions. The 56-year-old, the handpicked successor to socialist firebrand Hugo Chavez, branded it the war of oligarchy. U.S. sanctions mostly target regime individuals and state-owned company PDVSA, the government's main source of income, but the U.S. Treasury announced Friday that it was imposing sanctions on 5 intelligence and security officials close to Maduro. Meanwhile, Turkey has not yet revealed all the information it has discovered about the killing of journalist Jamaal Khashoggi. And the Saudi Consulate in Istanbul, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Friday. After weeks of denial, Saudi Arabia admitted that Khashoggi had been killed on October 2 after entering the consulate to obtain the paperwork necessary for his upcoming marriage to Turkish woman Hatice Cengiz. Turkey has said the journalist was killed by a team of 15 Saudis who strangled him, and Ankara has repeatedly asked Riyadh to identify the local who allegedly helped them dispose of the body, which has not been found. Riyadh has arrested a number of senior Saudi officials allegedly involved in the murder. Khashoggi, Washington Post contributor, was a fierce critic of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who denies any involvement in the murder. Ankara is determined to bring this case before international justice, said Erdogan, calling on the United States to weigh in this case. In other news, a French prosecutor said Friday they were investigating a sexual assault complaint made against the Vatican's envoy to Paris. In more unwelcome news for the Catholic Church as it looks to turn the page on years of scandal. Pope Francis has vowed that the Church will no longer ignore abuse allegations, and he removed 2 prominent cardinals from his inner circle late last year after they were tainted by pedophile scandals. The latest alleged sex scandal involves 74-year-old Luigi Ventura, Pope Francis' envoy to France, who is accused of molesting an official at the Paris mayor's office, a judicial source told media. Ventura, an archbishop, has served as apostolic nuncio to France since 2009 and is covered by diplomatic immunity. His Paris office did not respond to a request for comment. Vatican spokesman Alessandro Ghisotti said for his part that the Holy See was awaiting the outcome of the investigation. In the past, the Vatican, in line with diplomatic custom, has recalled any representatives implicated in the scandal. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Ani ng sining ng taong bayan.
For business news, this is Cesar Vallejos. European and U.S. stock markets slipped on Friday as positive signs emerged from U.S.-China trade talks aimed at averting an escalation of a tariff war between the world's top two economies. U.S. President Donald Trump said the negotiations in Beijing were going extremely well, and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping announced the talks would continue in Washington next week. Trump also said there was a possibility he would extend a March 1 deadline for a sharp rise in tariffs on $200 billion Chinese goods to go into effect.
We have a large team of very talented people in China. We've had a negotiation going on for about 2 days. It's going extremely well. Who knows what that means, because it only matters if we get it done, but we're very much working very closely with China and President Xi, who I respect a lot.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index finished the day up 1.7% to 25,883.25 to close its eighth straight week of gains. Bill Lynch on Hinsdale Associates said there is a lot of optimism that a deal will be done, and he'll believe it when he sees it, but it seems that a deal is fairly close. Investors also greeted Trump's decision to sign a spending bill that averts another government shutdown. Meanwhile, Trump's decision to declare a national emergency to fund a wall along the Mexican border, which is expected to face legal challenges, is a side issue, Lynch said. European markets also went gaga for the news of further trade talks as Frankfurt's DAX 30 closed up 1.9% and the Paris CAC 40 followed suit with a 1.8 rise on the day. Madrid's IBEX 35 index rose 2.0% after Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez called an early general election following the rejection of his draft budget in Parliament over the Catalan secession crisis. London's index also rose after stronger than expected British retail sales were reported for January as consumers seemed to shrug off Brexit blues. Oil prices continued to push higher on evidence members of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries are implementing production cuts. Brent oil futures finished at $66.25 a barrel, up 2.6% for the day and 6.7% for the week. After a brutal end of 2018, U.S. stocks have been on a tear since late December on expectations of a U.S.-China trade deal and relief at the Federal Reserve's shift to a more dovish posture. These views have allowed the market to overlook signs of weakness such as Federal Reserve data on Friday that showed a big drop in U.S. manufacturing for January. U.S. trade with Britain will increase very substantially post-Brexit, President Donald Trump predicted on Friday as a deadline looms for that country to leave the European Union. Trump told reporters they know all of the situation with respect to Brexit and the complexity and the problems, but they have a very good trading relationship with the UK.
We have a very good trading relationship with UK, and that's just been strengthened further. So with the UK, we're continuing our trade, and we are going to actually be increasing it very substantially as time goes by. We expect that the UK will be very, very substantially increased as it relates to trade with the United States. The relationship there also is very good.
With Britain due to exit the EU next month, London faces the prospect of losing the benefit of trade deals the EU struck with other economies, which could raise tariffs and other impediments to the country's exports. But the United States and Britain on Thursday announced two mutual recognition agreements to ensure the country will continue to be subject to the same criteria applied to the EU on rules for telecommunications and computing equipment, pharmaceuticals, inspections, and marine equipment. In case Britain crashes out of the EU without an agreement on trade relations, London has won agreements with Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and Switzerland to ensure mutual recognition of standards in goods trade, providing a bridge to new trading regimes for Britain outside the EU. Officials' figures this week showed the British economy posted its lowest growth in 6 years amid uncertainty over Brexit. President Rodrigo Duterte has signed the rice tariffication bill into law, Senate President Tito Soto said. The signing came after the president met with various rice traders who had been opposed to the measure that essentially allows the market to be flooded with cheaper rice imports for as long as they are imposed a tax. Under the measure, rice traders can import an unlimited quantity of rice for as long as they pay the 35% tariff on imports from other Southeast Asian countries. The president had said there was an urgent need to ensure the availability of rice in the country amid reports of rice shortage in some parts last year. Insurance companies in the country have been given the go-ahead by regulators to invest their funds in state-led infrastructure projects in a bid to boost the growth of the Philippine economy and help these firms meet the higher net worth requirement imposed on them for this year. Insurance Commissioner Dennis Puna has issued Circular Letter 2018-74, which enumerates the guidelines on how local insurance companies can invest their funds in the infrastructure projects of the government under the Philippine Development Plan. Under Circular Letter 2018-74, insurance and reinsurance firms may now invest in debt or equity security instruments for infrastructure projects under the PDP, participating either through the project proponents, financiers, or sponsors, or through operation and maintenance contracts. The circular creates a new investment channel for insurers and opens new opportunities for insurers to improve risk-adjusted returns, portfolio diversification, and asset liability matching. With the administration's Build program in full swing, insurers can take advantage of investing their assets in infrastructure projects to aid them in improving the revenue that would address their compliance with the statutory net worth requirements under the Insurance Code, FUNA said. The activities which may be undertaken as provided under the PDP include the highways, railways, non-rail-based transit facilities, port infrastructure, airports, warehouses, environmental and solid waste management-related facilities, and climate change mitigation and adaptation infrastructure projects. This year, insurance companies are required to comply with the increased net worth requirement of 900 million pesos from 550 million pesos in 2016. For purposes of determining the net worth of an insurance and reinsurance company, investments in infrastructure projects duly approved by the Insurance Commission shall now be considered as admitted assets. Furthermore, an important feature of the new regulation is methodology in calculating the risk factors of the investments in infrastructure in order to encourage insurer investment while still safeguarding their financial stability. Before an investment in infrastructure is approved by the insurance regulator, insurers are required to submit the financial statements of the infrastructure projects, which will be evaluated by the regulator to determine the risk impact on the capital of the insurer. Inflation could fall to as low as 2% in the third quarter as measures rolled out by the government to boost food supply will further stabilize consumer prices, according to Budget Secretary Benjamin Jokno. Jokno said that inflation in the second quarter may fall within the 2 to 4% target range of the government. He said, however, that the average rate in the first quarter may breach the target as the Philippines is coming from high inflation figures. Inflation in 2018 averaged 5.2%, the highest since 2009 when the rate settled at 4.2%. But a budget chief said inflation has been tapering off in recent months. Last month, the rate eased to 4.4% from 5.1% registered in December. Figures from the Philippine Statistics Authority show that while the January inflation rate was lower than the December figure, it is still higher than last year's 3.4%. In a joint statement, the National Economic and Development Authority, Department of Finance, and Department of Budget and Management said inflation will further ease in the coming months and settle at 3.2% and 3% in 2019 and 2020 as projected by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. This as they continue to push for the full implementation of non-monetary and administrative measures to stave off possible supply bottlenecks that have caused prices of key agricultural commodities to surge last year. The government is also currently looking for ways to improve the farm sector after its output grew by only 0.8% last year. While the hike in consumer prices was lower in January, local economists believe that the country's inflation woes are still far from over. University of Asia and the Pacific School of Economics Dean Sid Terosas told the Business Mirror earlier that the upcoming elections could still trigger an increase in prices, aside from a possible increase in world pump prices and adjustments to fuel excise taxes due to the tax reform for acceleration and inclusion law. That's it for business news. This is Cesar Vallejos, and I'm 1 with 25. Eaglenews International will be back. Stay with us.
school children go on strike across Britain in a protest against climate change, with hundreds rallying in London's Parliament Square. Watch this.
My future if governments don't do something about climate change, because the IPCC report makes it clear that if governments don't do anything, the world will be a lot worse place, because there'll be extreme storms, droughts, flooding, wars over natural resources, so there'll be a loss of stability across the world, and it could force up to 1 in 10 people to flee their homes.
Meanwhile, over 200 French school children skip school and demand action on climate change, following the example of other young demonstrators around Europe and in Australia. The students have called for a rally outside the Environment Ministry to urge the government to declare a state of ecological and social emergency, the organizers said on Facebook. Environment Minister Francois Derugi voiced support for the demonstration. The student action comes ahead of a global climate strike by youngsters on March 15, inspired by 16-year-old Swedish schoolgirl Greta Thunberg. She first grabbed the spotlight in August when she began staging school strikes for the climate, skipping classes on Fridays to protest outside the Swedish parliament. Students in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands have already staged marches in recent weeks to raise awareness of climate change.
Pour envoyer un signal, je pense que le gouvernement ne fait pas du tout assez en matière d'écologie, qu'on a beau faire Macron a fait un discours devant Trump avec Make Our Planet, etc. Mais bon, il ne fait pas grand-chose. Il y a la mine d'or en Guyane, un projet catastrophique. On sait que c'est sur les territoires indigènes, il me semble, c'est anti-écologique, les retombées économiques ne vont pas être terribles. Et malgré tout, il soutient ce projet, donc on voudrait vraiment que l'écologie prenne une place beaucoup plus importante. Un ministère ne devrait pas suffire, je pense qu'il faudrait traverser toutes les couches de la société. Et pourtant, j'ai l'impression que c'est quand même une logique économique qui prévaut encore.
La situation, elle va s'aggraver. Et nous, si on le fait maintenant au lycée, c'est parce qu'en fait, on veut bien étudier et faire tout ça. Sauf que si en 2050, la planète, ça va plus, qu'on peut plus trouver de boulot et que il y a énormément de pollution, tout ça, ça sert à rien qu'on commence à étudier maintenant. Du coup, en fait, il faut vraiment qu'on agisse maintenant. Et c'est bien que ce soit nous qui soyons concernés, parce que les adultes, ils font plus rien et ils se sentent beaucoup moins concernés. Parce que
j'en ai marre d'attendre, et parce que j'ai 17 ans et que mon futur, c'est pas comme ça que je veux le construire. Et qu'on attend, et ça fait des années qu'on sait qu'il faut qu'on se bouge et qu'on soit plus écolo et qu'on fasse des trucs pour la planète, et ça bouge pas.
North Korea holds the Day of the Shining Stars Synchronized Swimming Festival. The event is part of a series of events being held in the run-up to late leader Kim Jong-il's birthday. According to Pyongyang's orthodoxy, Kim Jong-il was born on February 16, 1942, at a secret camp on Mount Paektu, the spiritual birthplace of the Korean people, where his father, the North's founder Kim II-sung, was fighting the Japanese. But outsiders point instead to official Soviet records showing he was born a year earlier in a Siberian village where his father was in exile. Either way, the North celebrates the anniversary every year with skating and synchronized swimming shows, fireworks, and the Flower Festival. Still in North Korea, international skaters take part in an ice skating pageant in honor of the country's late former leader Kim Jong-il. The Paektusan Prize event was part of the annual festivities held in the run-up to the so-called Day of the Shining Star. Take a look. Not even severe weather that recently rolled over the Hawaiian Islands seemed to have hindered moviegoers in Honolulu from watching EBC Films' Guerrero. As it continues its North American tour, our young Hawaii correspondent Mio Acenas has all the details.
No matter how many times you fall down, you can always get back up. Good job casting crew. Great movie.
Oh, show me the moves then. You gotta show the moves. There you go.
So what do you think? Do you think people should watch it? How many times did you cry in the movie? 5 times. Yeah?
After much anticipation, EBC's first full-length movie has finally arrived in the Aloha State. EBC's Films Guerrero held its Hawaii premiere at the iconic Dole Cannery Theaters in Honolulu. Hundreds have gathered at the lobby to purchase tickets, get their photos taken in front of the giant movie poster, where they also had a chance to sign their names. Throughout the whole event, passers-by, even from other movies, expressed curiosity about the film, while some wished they could have seen Guerrero instead. EBC also took the opportunity to introduce Hawaii to its record label, E25 Records, by displaying and offering the debut album by famous Filipino hip-hop artist Rapido. Guerrero portrays the life of a young boxer from the Philippines who had to endure the blows and punches in life, both on and off the boxing ring. Directed by Carlo Artego Cuevas, the movie has already won multiple awards in the Philippines and overseas, including Best Editing of Foreign Language Film at the Madrid International Film Festival in 2018. Here are just a sample of reactions from the crowd after watching the film.
It's funny, it made me laugh, it made me cry, it's a really good story, much to see it. Just never give up, always put your faith and trust in God, and He will always help you and do whatever you need to do, so just never give up.
A little unexpected with the ending, although the message was very strong and meaningful. Kept it unpredictable, which is part of the drama of the movie. So, and being a sports fan, it brought a lot of elements to the way you build character in sport and in life. The connection of never losing hope, because that's what keeps the fight, literally.
Speaking of sequels, these moviegoers had some special requests, especially for the movie's director and EBC Films.
I'll tell you what, why don't you guys have if you have a request to the director of this movie, what would you like to tell us?
After being released all over the Philippines and parts of Asia, Guerrero made its North American debut in Las Vegas and Saskatoon, Canada last December. It has since been shown in New York City, New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia. Guerrero will continue its tour in select theaters across the U.S., Canada, and Europe. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Mio Acenas, 1 with 25.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Judith Timera, and I'm 1 with 25.